Good afternoon and welcome to day 2 of Festival of the Future. And we're coming to you live from Shaftesbury, which is in North Dorset. And we're coming to you live from the Future Classroom in Shaftesbury School. Now this is an amazing place of innovation and we're going to be really excited to be touring you all around it a little bit over the next session that we'll be spending time with you. So it's going to be really fantastic and we're going to have an amazing time and we're delighted that you're here. Lots of people are going to be contributing, but let me introduce you to our fellow hosts for this afternoon. So first of all, a huge welcome to Lucy Castle, who is a Year 13 student studying here at Shaftesbury School. Welcome, Lucy. Tell me, what are you studying? What A-levels are you doing?
So I'm studying currently biology, psychology and English literature.
Fantastic. That sounds great. And it's going well? You enjoying it?
Yeah, I'm loving it. It's a bit of work, but what's not? So it's just a lot of work to stay on top of, but I enjoy it.
Fantastic. Great. So really brilliant to have you here and great that you're sharing some of the experiences from your school here. Also, someone who perhaps went to school a little bit longer ago is Dorset Councillor Andrew Parry. Welcome, Andrew. Now, you've got a special role in Dorset Council, haven't you? Perhaps you could tell us what you're all about.
Yes, thank you, Thomas. And it's wonderful to be up here in Shaftesbury for the Festival of the Future event. My role at Dorset Council is a unique one and a very special one to me. I happen to be Dorset Council's cabinet member responsible for children, education, skills and early help.
Great, it's fantastic to have you here, Andrew, and we're going to be really interested to hear your reflections on the things that we're going to be seeing over the next couple of hours. And we really are going to be on a journey to explore what could education look like and how is it changing as we imagine the possibilities that are happening with both the technology and digital options we have today, but also into the future. And thinking about the future, we ran a fantastic event a couple of weeks ago at St Mary's School just down the road, where we invited 4 schools from this area, Year 5 students, to come and share with us their ideas and their imagination about what the future of education could look like. And we've recorded that and we've made that video available on YouTube on the Digital Dorset YouTube page. We'd love you to watch that and learn some incredible things about the possibilities and the imaginations of what we could do. Now, I actually haven't had a chance to see it yet, but these guys have. So, Lucy, what was your big takeaway? What was presented from those kind of Year 5 students that you thought, wow, that is an amazing idea?
So what was really fascinating to me is seeing what priorities a lot of the students had. So even though they're so young, their priorities were really fascinating in the way that they put inclusivity and mental health before anything else, and how to make sure that everybody has equal access to education despite their disadvantages.
Fantastic, great, really good reflections there. And Andrew, what was your takeaway from watching those students do amazing things?
Well, I always enjoy such videos because they really are an opportunity for the voice of young people to be heard and seen, and their wish to be engaged and included in everything that's going on in the educational setting, and how technology can transform lives. I mean, that's the important thing about it. And as we already heard, in areas such as health and well-being, it really does make a huge difference and matter to our young people.
Okay, great. Now, that event was a STEAM event, and we're going to be talking a lot about STEAM, and we're not talking about kind of boiling water, but we're talking a lot about what STEAM stands for during this live stream. So let's just test these two, see if they really know what STEAM stands for. So I'm going to go start with you. We'll start with you, Lucy. You've got the microphone. S, what does it stand for?
Science.
Science. T.
Lucy had the easy one. Technology, I'll go for on T.
Okay. E.
Isn't it engineering?
Engineering, that's correct. A, now this is the difficult one, but my favourite one.
I'm going to go with arts.
Absolutely. Excellent. And finally, what's the last letter? It is, of course, M.
That's mathematics.
Mathematics, and of course, yeah, absolutely. So science is of your interest on there, but I'm sure there's going to be something for everyone today. Now, in a minute, we're going to be having a little bit more of a look around this classroom and finding out more about what's happening now. But before we do that, I want to give you guys an opportunity to get involved today. This is all happening live, which is quite exciting for us, quite terrifying for all the people behind the camera. But what we're going to be doing is finding out what you want to ask the people that you're going to be seeing during this live stream today. So jump onto the Slido, slido.com. There's information, I think, on the screen. And if you search for FFest21, you'll have an opportunity to drop your questions into the kind of Slido chat, and then we will have a go answering your questions later on with a panel of fantastically brilliant STEAM-type people. So do, throughout this session, ask your questions, serious, fun, all those sorts of things. Let us know, and we will have a go answering those later on. So do jump onto Slido very shortly. Okay, so you've heard about the video, you've heard about the future education. We're now going to be going and looking at what education is happening now in this future classroom. And to do that, I'm going to be introducing you to the architect of the future classroom at Shaftesbury School. So, I will grab a microphone, come over, stand over here. This is, keep going, keep going, keep going. This is the festival site we are now at. So, Alex.
Hi. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Delighted to be here, enjoying this wonderful evening with you and all the millions of people that are watching tonight.
Millions and millions.
Millions and millions all over the world. And we're going to be traveling all over the world. Anyway, on to the point. This is the future classroom. Yep. This is Shaftesbury School. You're the guy that came up with all this. Tell us, well, tell everyone who's watching, what's it all about?
Okay, hi, my name's Alex Moore. Thanks for the introduction, Thomas. You're in the future classroom, and this is a really exciting space that we built for the future. It's an old art room. So about 2.5 years ago, it was kind of disused and pretty underloved. And I came up with a concept that I wanted to kind of disrupt the traditional education model. So at the time, I was reading a lot of literature around how classrooms haven't changed for such a long time, and I wanted to shake that up a little bit and come up with a different type of space. So this is an amazing room. It's very open, and there are no desks at all in this space. So that's one of the biggest changes that we've got. In a traditional classroom, obviously, we have the rows of desks, and we have the teacher at the front. The teacher can still work from the front in this classroom, but also they often work from the side and from the back. And we have 13 whiteboards surrounding the space and the motherboard that is behind me. Now, we created this entire space for no budget or cost to the school. We reached out to educational technology companies in order to help sponsor and endorse their products in exchange for publicity and a bit of road testing on our behalf. So behind me, you'll see an incredible projector. Epsom are one of our sponsors, and we are an ambassador school, and we work with Epsom on new creations and new products, and we road test a lot of their gear as well. We work with Catbox, which is an engagement microphone that you'll get to see later. A great bit of fun, soft microphone you can throw around the classroom. We also work with Satcoms Innovation, who are a STEAM company. We work very closely with them. They work in space, particularly around satellites. We work with Grapnell's Learnometer. So behind me, you'll see their product. Oh, it's fallen off the wall. It was there, I promise. And that measures variables in the room like CO2 levels, ambient noise, dust particles. And we also work with Biotecture, who make plant walls, because we're really interested in how oxygen levels in the room can help with retention and concentration. So they're our sponsors, and we're really proud to be working with them. But it's not just about technology, this space. When I built this space, I wanted to get the best technology with the best teachers. The technology is here to support the teachers, not to replace them. We want the students that work in this space to be owners of brilliant knowledge, not just consumers of it. So we work in something called an interdisciplinary way. And what that means is we work across the established subject disciplines. So normally a student might go to school and do maths period 1, and then period 2 they might go to French, and period 3 they might go to science. What we try and do in this space is combine all 5 of those STEAM disciplines that you heard Thomas talking about in 1 hour, 1 lesson. So students are working between across subject concepts and sort of interconnecting the learning in a fantastic way. So that's the first I that I'm going to talk about today, interdisciplinary. The second one is international. We have started to branch out, and there's been global interest in this project. And we're working with Ghana, Sweden, and just around the corner, Nigeria. And if you're watching this and you want to work with us, give me a shout. We'd love to work with you as well. So we'll talk about the Ghana project very, very shortly, and that's really, really exciting. It involves our students, but also theirs. And the last I that I'm going to talk about is intergenerational. So we're starting to do some work. We're starting to do some work with some of the elderly population who are retired that might have a bit of time on their hands, that want to get connected and work with young people for that amazing energy that they bring to learning. And we're re-inviting them back into school. And one of those projects I'm going to talk to you about tonight is the WISE Parental Engagement Project. And that sees generations of parents working with their children, which is a fantastic, amazing innovation. So you're really welcome. We are going to jump into a short video that's filmed by a colleague of mine called Mr. Cooper. And it is a sciencey, STEAM-based lesson around the future of food. We're going to interview Mr. Cooper in a short while. Before we do, let me set the context for the video you're about to see. So they are year 9, so these students are about 14 years of age, and they are working on what will the future of food look like. So we know that global populations are increasing. We know that COVID has made food supplies a difficult thing to come by. So in the future, it's highly possible that we, as a population, we might eat locusts, and crickets, and bugs, and mealworms, and seaweed, all this stuff we don't really think about at the moment. And our students have got these amazing creative minds, and they come up with some fantastic ideas. So we're going to dive into that, and straight after this video, we're going to interview Mr. Cooper and ask him about the process. So over to the video.
Okay, so we're here at Shaftesbury School, and I'm an assistant head teacher and year 6 teacher at Shaftesbury Primary School, and we've come to use the classroom in the future. So many things in there, concepts that the kids love and can engage with. Things I like in particular, whiteboards around the edge of the room, absolutely awesome. You've got kids of all abilities being engaged. Some are drawing diagrams, some are writing paragraphs. Makes a huge, huge difference to their learning and engagement instead of just being sat at a book. So that's one thing I'd like to take forward to our school. Things like the catch box, the microphone. You've got kids, girls who are quite shy, but they're happy to catch the box, bit of a novelty, speak that way. All the other tech, the VR, just so many different ways of learning. But I think the thing that impresses me the most is the ability for children of all levels, those who struggle and those who are more able, have all been able to work together in producing great work around different concepts. We've only had 3 lessons, so it's very early days, but it's something I think is great, and particularly I can see it working for things like maths, where you give kids a problem, they can solve it on the whiteboard, they can start drawing things, trying to work out how to solve the answer. Literacy, give them a piece of text, go and improve it. Science, yeah, I think it's great. The whiteboard's my favourite thing, as well as all the other things, so well done. Great stuff, Shaftesbury.
So the future classroom is a really brilliant space that children can just move freely. I really love that there are no tables, and the children really like that as well. The use of the whiteboards around the classroom as well is just brilliant. They just feel free, and it's really encouraged their creativity, and it's just been brilliant to see them flourish within the space.
So that was actually the shorter teacher's interpretation, and they are some year 5 and 6 teachers from the local school, Shaftesbury Primary, that we invited into the future classroom to bring their classes, and that was their interpretations of using the space. We're now going to jump over to the longer 6.5-minute edit of Mr. Cooper's year 9 science lesson now.
We've got a few more that have joined us. You will need to design a meat alternate future food. You need to consider the following things. What will it be made of? What nutrients will be within it? What will it look like? How will you grow or farm it? How can you market this so people will buy it? There's our challenge task there. We were talking about marketing over on this side of things as well. If I make a product associated with grown meat in a lab, are people going to want to actually buy it? Are there going to be misconceptions or negative viewpoints about this, which is going to prevent people from buying it? So let's hop forward. This is going to be our focus. Those are your instructions here. Now in each of your groups of, again, 4 or 5s, you'll need to decide a team leader, a head researcher, a graphic designer, and a presenter. At the end of the lesson, for 60 seconds, you will present your product. So you need to decide somebody in your group that will do so. I've gone forward again, let's jump back. Team leader is going to organise the group to ensure that all the tasks are done in the 10 minutes that you have. Head researcher is going to use the iPad, which is going to be available here for you. They are going to be leading the research on any things that you need to know. Nutrient data, how much things are going to cost, how you're going to farm it. Graphic designer, you're going to lead on creating the visual display. You're going to have one of the whiteboards around the room and create a visual display to try and sell your product. And lastly, the presenter will have the 60 seconds to sell the said products.
Ramelli's creamy ravioli, protein with every bite. So with this dish we've prepared, we have ravioli with crickets inside, with a fine creamy sauce, including mushrooms, parsley, lemons, all organic materials. The crickets provide lots of protein and it's very healthy for you. And seaweed, crispy seaweed, adds a bacon substitute. So, farmer's ham. I'm sorry, sir.
That's perfect. Well done. Do you want to give me a nice line to finish on? Just go with your stinger again if you want.
Right, so our idea is a sea roll. It basically substitutes the bacon for seaweed, which takes out the meat. And because it's known that apparently that seaweed might taste like bacon, and you have to put ketchup in it, because otherwise you wouldn't just not have a plain bacon roll with no ketchup. And then you've got the seaweed here, drawn by Amelia, she's drawn the seaweed. And then you've got the bun with the seaweed, ketchup, and the bun. And yeah, so basically you could have seaweed for breakfast in the next 100 years. Okay.
Whenever you're ready.
This is our $1 billion idea. So we put bugs instead of meat to create food which looks like it naturally would be with meat. So it's better for people who prefer food not looking like it has bugs in it. So we've got seaweed as bacon, and it can be put in salads and stuff to replace meat because it tastes like bacon. And we've also got crickets as chicken nuggets and burgers to replace your favourite McDonald's meals. And then all together it would create a really nice burger. With seaweed, it's healthy, you can get it in large quantities, and bugs are no longer for inhaling, they're now eating.
Good morning. Chili chicken salad wrap? No, it's chicken tofu salad wrap. It's a tastier, healthier wrap of your daily choice of food from Mackie D's. Just a bit healthier. We swapped the chicken with tofu. It is marinated tofu with sweet chili sauce and mealworms, and also crispy onions with a bit of oomph, you know. It's got the mealworms to provide the protein. It's got the tofu and salad and such to provide nutrients. It's just, you won't even know that that's tofu. You just think it's like chicken nuggets instead of chicken, you know. The wrap's also tasty as always. Anyway, I can't believe it's not chicken.
Back to Shaftesbury School. That was a really fascinating video learning all about the future of food. Here we have Ollie Cooper himself. So tell me, how is it different working in the future classroom as opposed to your normal one?
That's a great question. So I really like using the future classroom, mostly because of the dynamic space that you actually can teach within. Not having the desks being restrictive so the students can move around. It's really helpful if you've got neurodivergent students as well, so they have a lot more ability to move around, a lot more sensory activities as well that they can engage with. In terms of actually teaching within here, it gives me another opportunity to teach in a different way, in such a way that I can look at a lesson I would do in my lab, which is about 2 meters below us right now, and actually teach in a space here that works a lot better. In terms of the lesson as well, I've really enjoyed teaching it, mainly because it's usually a little bit out of subject. Like Alex was saying, this interdisciplinary way of learning, it's really useful because it allows us to connect different subjects. One of the things I really like to do, which you may have seen, Alex, was taking the kind of literacy focus within the lesson. So putting in literacy within the science, within the global citizenship kind of viewpoint, really like doing that, especially within this space here.
Yeah, definitely. And do you think that more classrooms will look like this in the future?
I really hope so. I really like this space. As I said, I think it allows students to be a lot more creative. It allows for dynamic usage of the room. I think that you allow for a lot more discussion-based activities. You can have a lot more group-based activities around the room, especially using the whiteboards you can see around us. I think that allows for a much more evolving lesson, and it can really take you on a journey through the lesson where you change from activity. Actually involves a location change as well, which you might not be able to have when you've got desks in the classroom.
Yeah, and my final question, it has to be asked, what is your favourite part of the room?
Oh, my favourite part. It's tricky because I really like the whiteboards, but I must say I really like the Epson projector, mainly because there's some amazing science videos, and I'll be a little bit biased here because I'm a science teacher. There's a piece of software called MosaWeb, and they have these amazing up-to-date dynamic videos of, I tend to use it for like specialized cells. We've done it for geography work as well. There's a great one on the history of the atom that allows it to be a really sort of dimensional space, 3D image of an atom actually rotating around. So instead of this, oh yeah, what's written down, you can actually see it. And I think that this space really allows for that to happen.
Yeah, definitely. And Mr. Moore, this is your baby, isn't it? Hang on.
Yeah, this classroom's my baby. And we're going to chat about an international project now, a collaboration that came about with Ghana. So we are a 100 ambassador school. So when we started this project, we subscribed to an organization called 100org. And they represent many different countries in the world that are working in the space of innovation, technology, and pedagogy, teaching and learning. And we signed up. I became an ambassador for 100. And as a result, schools have reached out to us. And one of those schools is based in Ghana, in Africa. And what's fascinating about this collaboration, guys, is that they're only an hour's time difference. So we can buzz into Ghana through Zoom into a live lesson, and we can learn together some pretty interesting concepts. So that's what we did. But it wasn't always plain sailing. The first lesson was pretty hard going. So yeah, do you want me to talk about that a little bit? The first lesson, in Ghana, the power grid cuts out very often. So we lost them twice. They just disappeared from the Zoom meeting mid-lesson. We didn't know where they'd gone. And we found out afterwards that the national power grid is not as reliable as in the UK. And that is one of the barriers they're facing to learning in Ghana. Another issue that we had was the technology that they were trying to use to get into the lesson in Ghana. So essentially the teacher, Daniel, who you'll meet in a moment, was running the lesson off a smartphone with his students in the background. So we couldn't really see him, we couldn't really hear him. So we reached out to our sponsors who kindly provided us with a laptop, a webcam, and a microphone. We posted it out to Ghana. Pleased to say they now have it. And last time we connected, it was beautiful. We could see them, we could hear them, and our students could hear them, and it just worked a dream. So the types of things that we're looking at, you'll hear Daniel talk about in the video. We're looking at social issues to do with climate change. We're looking at sort of future food. And quite recently, we did a lesson on ghost nets, which actually is a problem in this country. So fishing nets that are left at the bottom of the oceans as a byproduct. But they're more of a problem in Ghana, where a lot of the children that go to this school, parents are fishermen. So that was a really fascinating collaboration. And we're meeting them again on Friday to do a follow-up on that project, where the students in Ghana are going to present their products that they're going to make out of ghost nets to our students, who will then talk and give some more ideas. So that's the Ghana collab. We're going to jump straight over that and have a look at that video now. So enjoy. Over to Ghana. What are the biggest barriers to learning in Ghana?
Well, there are so many challenges when it comes to learning or accessing quality education or e-learning opportunities or essential digital skills in Ghana. Lack of electricity, lack of network coverage, high cost of equipment, and also even limited access to skills on the technical know-how. All these things prevent the essential technology from reaching most communities here in Ghana, or maybe most people in Ghana taking advantage of online learning. Similarly, because they are limited to access to this connectivity to their device and to the skills, which we know is a necessity to drive, which is a necessity skills, which is driving online learning. So we recognize the digital gap as a new form of global inequality like poverty, the digital gap has a massive devastation impact on people in Ghana. Whilst the rest of the world have extensive ICT infrastructures and opportunity, most individuals in Ghana still lack access to computer and mobile phones. So that is how great the challenge has been.
And then the final question for me is, what are your aims and aspirations for getting more technology into lessons in Ghana in the future?
Okay. So as you know, we are living in a global world where people now, there's no barrier to accessing jobs. So our organization, our focus as Africa ICT Right is to prepare young or the youth for future jobs, for future digital job through technology to education or skill development. So we hope to achieve this by partnering with technology-enabled organizations to drive solutions related to technology, education, technology for good, digital skills, future for jobs, and other subjects of interest that may come along. So our aim and inspiration is embedded in technology to enable us to deliver fresh, innovative, and inspiring approach to learning by harnessing student emphasis and curiosity to face future challenge hands on. Yeah.
It's an amazing answer, and like I'm really looking forward to next Friday because we're going to do a lesson on fish nets, like ghost nets,
Yes.
and we're going to connect Shaftesbury School with Ghana, and that will be amazing. So thank you. The first thing I want to do before I play you guys a video and the guys in England is I want you just to talk amongst yourselves and tell me what these are made of. What is this material that we're dealing with fishing nets? Have a little chat. I'll give you 2 minutes to talk in Ghana, 2 minutes to talk in the UK. What is this made of?
The net is made from nylon.
Okay, nylon. So you reckon it's made of nylon? Okay, that's great. Shaftesbury, what do we reckon it's made out of? Nylon. You think it's nylon? Okay, so the next thing I want to do is, yeah, you're right. It's made out of nylon. It didn't used to be made out of nylon. It used to be made out of hemp, which hemp is biodegradable. These are called microbeads or microplastics. In my hand, I'll show you here. So these are tiny little pieces of plastic that have come from the nylon strands of the fishing net. So I'll just show these to the Shaftesbury students as well. So these are called microplastics, guys. Now, although nylon is strong, and that is a good thing, and it lasts for years, these tiny little fibres, I'll try and get you a real close-up on them, these little fibres here, they fray when they're exposed to salt water, and they break off, and the fish eat these little bits of plastic. So they consume these tiny little bits of plastic, and it goes inside their stomach. So we drag the net along, trying to catch fish, and what happens is it catches on a rock shelf, and the boat can't move because it's stuck. So what the fishermen do is they cut it off with a pair of knives, like, and then the fishing net just stays at the bottom of the ocean like this. And this is why it's called a ghost net, because it looks like a ghost, like this, at the bottom of the ocean. And then all the sea life, like turtles, dolphins, whales, sharks, rays, they all swim into this and they get stuck. So we're going to have 10 minutes, it's that way, isn't it? 10 minutes. And what we're going to do in Ghana and in the UK is we're going to write down as many products that we could make out of these fishing nets as we can think of in 10 minutes.
We can use this for new function dresses, baskets, bags, caps, function shoes, resting nets, table cover, wristband.
Amazing. Thank you.
Toys, skis, carpet, phone cases, clothing, bottles, doormats, blankets, hats and costumes.
Okay, thank you, Matt. In our next lesson, what I would like us to do is, out of that list of products that you have all written down, I want you to choose one idea, one product. So one of them, and Shaftesbury will do the same. And I want you guys to draw it. I want you to draw it and I want you to tell me how you're going to make it. So what will be the manufacturing process that you do? UK! Ghana! Yeah!
And welcome back to the Future Classroom here at Shaftesbury. Mr. Moore, what an amazing video from Ghana. But Ghana must seem light years away from dear old Dorset, if I can put it like that. Can you just give us some idea? Because clearly there's a great passion from the teachers to impart that knowledge and enthusiasm for learning. And there's that enthusiasm from the students and the desire to learn. Do you just want to give us a little bit more background to that from your perspective?
Definitely. So the learning that you're talking about is really just organic. We come up with something called a super concept, which is a really big human-heavy problem like overfishing, overpopulation, food crisis. And what we do is we teach the students in both countries via Zoom the content, so they have the knowledge associated with the concept that they're learning. Once they have the knowledge, then we let them create. So in the Future Classroom, we have 12 students, and they'll go away and use the whiteboards and work in teams. And in these teams, there's a team leader, there's a presenter, there's a scribe who's normally pretty good at drawing and writing, and there's a research assistant, and the same in Ghana. What we'll then do is have 20 minutes, half an hour, whilst we mute the Zoom, to work on the concepts. Then they present using the catchbox to the different countries live, which is incredible. And then they actually take question and answers from their peers. And we have one student who came to see me at school. She was desperate to work on this project, and she is from Ghana. She speaks the local dialect, she speaks the language, and she speaks directly to them as a translator when the language becomes too complex. So we've got this amazing global international theme going on, but we've also got this really high levels of engagement from students working in real time with another country.
So, Mr. Moore, where's next on the list of the world to travel to within the Future Classroom?
That's an amazing question, and one of the beautiful things about technology is you can connect at the touch of a button to anywhere around the world, as we're going to see with Australia shortly. But we already have work with Sweden, so 3 of our students joined an international hackathon, and at that event there was Estonia, there was Greece, there was the Netherlands, and the country that won it was United Arab Emirates, so congratulations to them. But next up, to answer your question, is Nigeria. So we've made contact. Our first lesson is in 10 days' time, and we'll see how that goes.
Fantastic. But I know the answer of what is actually coming next. Okay, and by the magic of green screen, Thomas Fowler is going to whiz from the virtual classroom past Ghana and arrive at the Arts University of Bournemouth.
So Thomas is talking to Dan Cox now, who is the head of the Open Campus at Arts University Bournemouth, and they're discovering on how Arts University Bournemouth has adapted to cater for the pandemic of 2020. I'm really fascinated in this subject as a student that's looking forward to going into university next year.
Fantastic. Thanks very much, Lucy. And here we are. I've whizzed over using the power of technology. There's the camera. Here is AUB, and here is Dan, who's going to be telling us all about it. So, Arts University Bournemouth. So let me work a few things out. It's probably got something to do with the arts. It's probably a university, and I'm guessing it's in Bournemouth. Tell me, what is AUB?
We are, actually, I think we're on the border of Walsdown, so we're just outside Bournemouth, technically. We're a specialist art and design institution. We have a range of courses from architecture through textiles, through fashion, and we also have the Bournemouth Film School, which is a fully functioning kind of film production unit. So as well as having acting, film, animation, also has VFX, costume, makeup, prosthetics, so we can create kind of quite spectacular performances.
Fantastic. Well, I know you also got the loveliest front door of anyone I've ever seen.
This is our bespoke drawing studio. It's a gorgeous building.
Fantastic. So a real kind of hive of creativity, but of education, and I guess, you know, using that opportunity to explore learning in different ways, really.
Yeah, I mean, we're really a community of about 4,000 2D, 3D designers and makers in both virtual and real spaces. So yeah, it's a very kind of vibrant place to be.
So I can imagine, you know, in terms of that vibrancy, much of that vibrancy is around bringing creatives together, sharing that space, sharing those ideas, sharing that energy. Now, if we go back to March last year, you know, and sorry to bring this up, everyone, but, you know, we have been through a horrific COVID pandemic. And I remember, you know, a lot of conversation at the time was how this is affecting universities. And there was a lot of things in the news around students having to go home, are they going back? So if you, you know, sorry to take you back to this, but if you could just cast your mind back to March, you know, with you guys, the kind of leadership of the university, what were the conversations that were happening? What were the kind of dilemmas and challenges you were facing in those early days?
I mean, in many ways, the pandemic really struck at the heart of what we are and what we do and how we operate. Actually, one of the things I was doing at the time was I just put together an exhibition featuring 15, 16 of our alumni looking at their kind of future creative careers and the kind of great things that they've achieved. And as the year went on and everything became shut down, that sort of became increasingly poignant. But yeah, I mean, there was a lot of uncertainty initially. A lot of that was coming down from sort of, you know, the government decisions on, are we, oh sorry, I've turned completely away.
It's all about you guys, so we're going to look into our eyes and hear the wonderful things.
Yeah. So a lot of that was around, you know, the government guns coming down. Are you going to shut down? Are we going to be open? But there comes a point when actually it's a problem to be solved, right? And as a group of creative people, you look at the problem and you go, how do we solve this? And partly that's logistical. How do you teach prosthetics when no one can touch anyone else? How do you teach making subjects when the students don't have access to resources? And then partly it's the, you know, it's the real heart of, which I think everyone's touched on so far. These are tools that allow us to communicate. And really, it's the sense of community that you then have to look after. You can get people kit. We put together resource packs for students and sent out physical kit. We got laptops together for students that didn't have access to that technology. But then you've got to use the tools at your disposal to keep that engagement going and keep that community going.
Yeah, so I'm interested. Big challenges, and in some senses, I mean, I don't know, I guess maybe my ignorance, you think, well, you know, students, most of them are going to be tech savvy, they're going to be good communicators, they're going to be using social media and talking to each other all the time. So in some senses, you wouldn't think, well, this isn't a huge challenge to overcome, even though these are substantial questions that you're trying to answer. But you're saying you had to dig deeper than that in terms of not only, yeah, okay, there's providing kit and there's providing some tools, but what were the kind of, I guess, the processes, what were the kind of, the foundations to ensure that actually went deeper than just being able to chat to each other on Teams or Zoom, but actually bring that sense of creativity, community together?
Well, I think, so the way AEB kind of works is everything's very studio-based. We don't have a lot of mass lecture spaces. So you end up with a very tight-knit community of academics and students that work together in the same space kind of day in, day out and create together. You think about it, it was kind of March when things broke down, so some of the first years really haven't been together that long. You're only just sort of forming those bonds. Foundation students as well, you know, they're kind of quite early in their careers in some sense. So you do have to find sort of different channels and different ways to kind of allow people to engage and co-create. But I think sometimes the tools have been really useful. I mean, I've been really guilty of, you know, doing a 45-minute talk at people and then at the end saying any questions and hoping that someone's going to engage with me. Whereas with the virtual setup, you get dialogue the whole way through with students able to type in questions and interact and feedback, and you can get much interesting side conversations going as well. So that sort of engagement's been really good.
So talking about one thing that really worked really well, you know, in terms of you think, well, this was so good actually, we're going to do this forever until the next great idea comes on. What was the thing that you think, wow, we've improved something here?
There are two things, actually. One is around sort of supporting what we call in perpetual teaching. So you're able to videotape, record particular ways of using kit and technology, and then students can see that outside of the studio setting and they can revise it, which means they get more studio time, actually, which is useful. And the other thing is reach. We did an access and participation workshop recently where we got about 20 kids together to do portfolio preparation, help them get into university. We were getting people engaged from Birkenhead, from Manchester, from York. We wouldn't have got that if it was still a physical residential. We just wouldn't have been able to bring those people down. So I think, yeah, reach has been one of the key things for me, I think.
Brilliant. Well, those both sound really interesting, but it can't all have been plain sailing. What, I guess, you know, we know the fundamental challenge, but what things, what were some of the challenges you faced, I guess, trying to transition your community from one way of practice and one way of being with each other to this new way? What did you find the hardest obstacles to overcome?
Well, I mean, that's a really difficult question, but a good one. Some subjects, so say, I think makeup's a good one because that really exemplifies. With you're creating prosthetics, you have to stand with someone for 3, 4, 5, 6 hours. You have to touch another person. So those things were completely taken away. So those students had to really adapt to them working on themselves. And if you look at the work they created, which you can see at aub.ac.uk, you can see it's still brilliant, but they haven't got to experience different skin tones. They haven't got to experience working on another human being. So those skills that actually really do rely on being with someone, I think they were kind of fundamentally attacked.
Right, okay. So lots of challenges, lots of great things that came about. And I guess in all of that, the process, like all of us in all our different workspaces, trying to figure that out and learn. One thing would you approach differently? I guess, let's say I took you back now through time to March last year. What different approach would you take, or what one sort of thing would you approach in a different way, knowing what you now know in terms of how to respond to something unexpected?
Yeah, I think if you asked any individual academic, they'd have 100 things they want to tweak or experiment or change. I think the broad approach we took was right, and you can see that in terms of what the students were still able to deliver. One thing that we did sort of have to sacrifice was our wider engagement, so our community engagement and our civic engagement, by concentrating on the core delivery. So I think if something like this happened again, or I was taken back in time, I'd like to look at the lessons that we learn in doing undergraduate and postgraduate delivery and see if we can apply those to some of the community-focused work that we do to keep that going, because I think that was a real absence.
Fantastic. Well, Dan, that has been really good. I hope you guys have really enjoyed that. I hope you're having a really, really good time learning with us all through this wonderful Festival of the Future. And remember, you can get involved from home or wherever you are, even if you're on the beach, providing you've got a Wi-Fi signal. Hey, there's our idea for a future festival day another day. Wi-Fi on the beach, because, hey, we can't be distracted by the beauties of nature. We want to check our iPhones. But anyway, I'm going off the subject now. Get onto slido.com, search for FFest21 and ask your questions. We've got like walking geniuses like Dan here and the other people that you've met. And we've even got Councillor Parry as well, who is fantastic answering questions. That's what he does all day, every day. So drop your questions on that slido.com and we will have time to answer them later on. So hopefully you're having a great time. We're going to go, well, from the border of Bournemouth all the way over to Australia. I'm actually going to go there myself. Alex.
Thank you. Welcome, James McDermott, joining us from Sydney this morning, James.
Yeah, just hour south of Sydney, 4 in the morning.
4 in the morning, dedication.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Pleasure, and welcome to the Future Classroom. Although you're no stranger to this space, we've worked together for a while. So, James, why don't you tell the audience how you came to work with Shaftesbury School?
Yeah, sure, thanks. So I was working for a company called Curious, and during my time there as a learning designer, had a terrific opportunity to work with a team of clinical psychologists, software developers, animators, voiceover artists, script writers. It goes on and on and on. It was a terrific, huge collaboration effort to build out a learning program, a suite of learning programs based around virtual reality. And the program is called Wise Emotional Fitness. And Alex, being the person you are, and your Future Classroom initiative that you've got up there, was a terrific opportunity for us to explore how we could best use this program and this use of technology in a way that really none of our users of the program around the world have done it before. And primarily that's around engaging of the whole community, including of the parents, which is something we've always dreamed about with the development of the program. The program is not just about delivering to students, it's supporting of teacher training, as well as I mentioned, the engagement of parents to build out that whole WISE learning ecosystem is what we went and called it. And so when the opportunity came to be a part of your initiative and your vision for seeing how a school operates and how you can best utilize these forms of technology, which I'm happy to talk more about as well, we were really excited by the opportunity that you presented, and that's how we got to know you and the work that you've been doing since.
Magic. Thank you so much, James. And just for the audience that might not be familiar with virtual reality, I've got a headset here in my hand. Will you just explain to everybody what VR, what virtual reality actually is?
Yeah, sure. So the first thing to say is it is fundamentally different between augmented and virtual. So, and then within the virtual reality space, no pun intended, there is now a huge offering of different types of product and solutions to deliver that type of experience. So it wasn't too long ago that really we were kind of confined to holding of the virtual reality headset, much like you're doing right now. Then all of a sudden, headsets were built around head straps, which means you could be hand-free, and that's what we call immersive virtual reality. Yep, much like you're doing now. And as soon as that came into the world, things started to change quite significantly in terms of how the use of this technology can elicit different responses within the user experience. And so within augmented reality is basically where you're augmenting your own reality with a phone, for example. So you'll have projection work coming out into your reality where you can still see everything around you in the real world. You can still operate within the world that you live within and moving within, but you can see other things that pop up within your world, hence the operative word augmented. When it comes to immersive virtual reality, you are purely immersed in a completely different space, completely different environment. And so when we think of immersive virtual reality, the first thing that comes to mind is the word presence. The sense of presence when you're in a new place is very, very powerful. And for anyone that's got further interest in learning more about the power of presence within virtual reality, there's a huge amount of research now to show its effect, and I'm more than happy to provide that research. But since the transition from a hands-free experience, so you can think of Google Expeditions, was really a game changer for bringing virtual reality into learning in particular. It was very successful. It's now moved on to that immersive virtual reality experience, and headsets are coming in at a much more reasonable price, which is also a really good thing for everybody. The opportunity to then think about, well, what does social emotional learning look like, for example, soft skill development with the use of virtual reality, was too good opportunity to pass up.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about that actually, because one of the things that really attracted me to this virtual reality program was the fact that James and his company had developed social and emotional learning material that could be viewed in the virtual reality domain or ecosystem. And up until this point, a lot of what I come across with VR was game related. So Oculus headsets, it was very game related. It wasn't too orientated towards education. Now, obviously, we're about education here and educating children. So I wanted to find something that walked that fine line between fun, being immersive, but also being really educational. And WISE is an incredible platform. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about it before I ask James some questions about how he developed it and sort of the theory and the neuroscience behind it. So first of all, the WISE emotional fitness, a social emotional fitness program, it is all about putting students into virtual reality in the classroom setting. Now, if you've done that as an educator, you'll know there are some barriers, one of which is as soon as you put a VR headset over children's eyes, the noise level in the classroom goes out of control, and it's really difficult to bring them back down again because you're essentially replacing their senses, and they get really excited. So that was one barrier we had to overcome, and we overcome that by using headphones. So simple fix, and it works beautifully. Another thing that I was intrigued by was this social emotional learning, because it's almost the invisible thing to do with mental health that perhaps we as educators, we can see the sort of effects of it, but we can't always do much about it, because sometimes it happens at home, sometimes it happens on social media or via peer groups. So I was really intrigued to explore this space virtually, which is why we reached out to James and we worked on a collaboration, and this program is absolutely incredible. at doing exactly that. So let's just focus on that point quickly. So James, tell us more about the WISE program, particularly the social emotional aspect.
Sure. Yeah, look, that's really the premise for the whole genesis of the creation of the program. It was an opportunity that came to the company Curious a couple of years ago. It's probably important to say that this is not a pandemic solution. This is something that we decided, or we came up with when we had the opportunity before the pandemic, because we had recognized through the longevity of the company and its adoption of these types of technologies, and probably more importantly, the use of the type of experience that they create through computer-generated content creation, which essentially means there's elements of gamification to it. Like you mentioned, virtual reality is synonymous with gaming. This program is not necessarily a game, but it employs certain gamification techniques. So when you go into, and some of you I believe will have an experience of this, which is terrific, but basically when you go into the virtual reality world, you are transported into a whole new place. You have opportunities to jump through televisions, to go through mirrors, and where you end up on the other side of those televisions and mirrors are what we call safe places, or environments which enables you to feel calm and collected, to be able to be in a position where you can learn certain skills based around cognitive behavior therapies, which has been a technique in therapy training for over 20 years, I mean, many decades, around how to understand ourselves, to better understand how we operate on the outside, to then better function as a human being. So, for example, one of the opportunities you have there is, if you jump through the mirror, you'll go into a fantastical world where you'll see a boulder. A boulder is a metaphor for our emotions and how do we let go of our emotions. And as soon as you manage to let go of that boulder, it starts to create a roller coaster ride, which then creates a whole new theme park. And the idea is that the boulder is acting as the waves of emotions as it creates this roller coaster experience that you can see. You don't actually experience a roller coaster. I have to make that really clear, because one of the first things that happened when virtual reality came to education was it did directly carry across from gaming initially, and everyone wanted to go on a roller coaster ride. That doesn't then tend to bode very well for our motion sickness tendencies. So rest assured, you don't actually go on a roller coaster, but you see a roller coaster being built through the metaphor of a boulder. And that's just one experience of many across the program. I think the thing I do want to say and really reiterate, though, is that when we designed this experience or this program, it wasn't all about virtual reality. Virtual reality certainly is a tool to deliver a very powerful experience, as if you were in a clinical psychologist practice, but you're actually in a classroom, like you mentioned, Alex, which is really a game changer, really, thinking about how do we democratize these everyday life skills. One way of doing that is virtual reality, for sure. However, we also ensured that as part of the delivery of the program, we employed the blended learning design here. So if you have an hour-long lesson, for example, let's say for 45 minutes, which generally is the benchmark for a lesson, you're only in virtual reality for about a third of that time. The rest of that time, you're actually asked and tasked to work with your peers, as well as your teachers or educators and parents, like you did, Alex, with your parental engagement project, with a suite of guidebooks, which is either digitalized or you can have them printed out and you can actually complete them in the analog world. That's really important. That's about consolidation of learning. That's about doing your reflections, working with groups, working with your peers to collaborate and problem solve real life scenarios based on skills that you've developed within that virtual reality experience. So it carries across, so it's not just seen as a tokenistic gesture, that it's just fun, because I'm learning in VR, which is a big part of it, of course. It's actually, well, how do I use my experiences I've attained within the virtual reality world to my real life in a real situation?
Brilliant, thank you. So much information there. And from a user's point of view, because obviously I'm the user here and the students in the classroom are using these VR headsets. So if you're a teacher watching this and you're thinking, how on earth will this work within an hour's lesson? I can tell you it does. So if you have 30 children in your class and you have 15 headsets. You can have 15 in VR, and the other 15 taking notes with a booklet that James and company have designed that goes alongside it. And then they swap over. And we found that sort of 10, 12, 15 minutes is the maximum amount of time that people should be in VR, because after that, they get a little bit disorientated when they come out of it. But it is incredible when they're in there. Now, if you're trying to imagine what this looks like, the first scene, you are in a virtual attic, which looks like the attic of like a stately home, and it's completely 360, so you can look around and see all the way around, up and down, all the artifacts within the attic. Then what happens is a digital avatar, I think I've got that right, called the Wise One. It looks like Harry Potter's Quidditch ball. It comes out and it talks to you, and it gives you instructions, and it's got the most calming voice. So when we put the head teacher through VR, she said it was the most calm she'd felt in months, which is fantastic. And we put a lot of our staff, and 612 students so far have done lessons 1 to 5, which is incredible. And I can't speak highly enough about this, but James, my favorite character by far is the boxlings. So can you tell us a little bit about the boxlings and what they represent?
Yeah, sure. So the boxlings are an important part to the learning design of the program, which is all about, so we employed 2 methodologies. One is learn, do, teach. So you learn something, you do it, then you teach it to others, which again is the incorporation of the blended learning design that I alluded to. And the other part is of the inside out. So we focus on ourselves before we can then focus on others. And so the boxlings represent the outside world. So if you're thinking, if you think of the 15 to 20 minutes that you mentioned, Alex, of how long we should spend in virtual reality, the majority of it is focused on the inside, yourself, which is about skill development. And then the other part of it, which is part 2 of each of the lessons, is focusing on the outside, as I mentioned, which is then portrayed within the world of the boxlings. These are fictional characters in a fictional world, of course, where you see certain scenarios that are most likely and hopefully scenarios you've experienced before, where, for example, you're slumped over in a locker room, or you have an altercation in the school cafeteria, or actually even just waking up late, or you have a choice. Do you get up when you need to get up, or do you sleep in a little bit longer and then set your day maybe off on the wrong foot, as we say? These are the scenarios that play out within the world of the boxlings. So within the attic that Alex mentioned, which is really your home base, if you look around, you'll see little shelves within the cupboards, and within each of those individual shelves, there is actually an individual boxling world that is playing out whilst you're operating within the attic. And so the gamification that I was referring to is clever here, whereby when you have the opportunity to witness a scenario play out, you then have a choice based on this self-determination theory, where you can then choose to say, well, I think I'm going to employ this particular skill first, and then I'm going to employ the other skill second, to see whether I can get my boxlings back into what we call the sweet spot, which is the green zone colloquially, or based around the zone, I was going to say zone of proximal development. It's not too far off that, but the window of tolerance is the technical term there, where you're either hyper-aroused or hypo-aroused, and we're always trying to get ourselves back into the sweet spot. And essentially, the world of the boxlings is all about that.
Amazing. And we've got about 5 minutes left, so I just want to jump into the parental engagement survey that we did. So just to give you a bit of context at home, we invited parents back to school, which is pretty groundbreaking, because some of them hadn't been in a school building for 20, 25 years. And we said, we put it out to all parents in the school, so almost 1,000, and said, who wants to come and do some VR, virtual reality, with their children? 15 brave souls put themselves forward, and for 5 weeks, we brought them into this space, we put them in virtual reality, and they worked one-to-one with their child. Now, there's some interesting findings that we'll talk about really quickly. Firstly, none of the participants who were parents had ever done VR before. That was the first thing. Second thing, their biggest fear was that they would fall over, embarrass themselves in front of their kids, or get motion sickness. Whereas I think 14 of the 15 kids had done it before and done it plenty of times. So that's a big generational change. So this is intergenerational learning, bringing the adults back into the learning space. And what we were trying to do with this project was to try and break down some of the barriers that might exist in the home. conflict with teenagers and adults, falling out over all sorts of things. And at the end of the program, the feedback was incredible, saying, you know, they felt much calmer. Some of the conflicts had been resolved at home and they learned from the program. So James, from your perspective, what did you find interesting about the parental engagement?
Yeah, look, I think the things you mentioned as barriers to entry are very true of anyone that actually is looking to experience virtual reality. There is a lot of, it's changed a lot actually since COVID, but certainly before COVID, when we were out there exploring appetite for the technology, it was a difficult journey. There was a lot of unsureness around the technology, but as soon as one has an experience of it, like you mentioned, Alex, there is a bit of a game changer mentality there. They're like, oh, wow, this is incredibly powerful. I'm so glad I got to experience it. I'm glad my students are experiencing it. But I think one of the key takeaways I took from the report that you compiled was that the parents enjoy the experience immensely, but what they enjoyed more than anything else, and correct me if I'm wrong here, Alex, was that they actually had an opportunity to learn side by side with their own children in a really authentic, meaningful way about something that correlates with their own needs as well as their own children's needs. And that was really interesting for me. It was almost like virtual reality was bringing us back to a point where there's a sense of community engagement that really we haven't seen for quite some time. It's like you learn at school, then you do something else at home. Well, we don't really operate like that, actually. We're always learning. And we're always learning together. It just happens to be in different physical spaces. But what if we can do that in a virtual space together is something really quite unique. And there's a lot of conversation about that right now with the rise of a notion called the metaverse. So we're in an interesting space.
Definitely. And just on that note, it's so fascinating that technology can sometimes isolate us and separate us from people. But at the same time, it can also unite us and be something that connects us. So I love that. I love that. And just to finish, James, if you had a crystal ball, what will technology, VR, everything that you stand for, look like in schools in 10 years' time? Take it away. You've got 1 minute to tell the audience.
Look, I'm going to use a really weird example because it was a scary movie and based around crime solving. But if anyone has seen Minority Report, some of those scenes where the actor Tom Cruise is projecting things up into his physical space to manipulate, to try and solve certain crimes with his fingers in an augmented reality environment, I think that's where we're going to go. As I mentioned before, this notion of the metaverse, which is really the culmination of all Internet of Things. So virtual reality is just one part of a greater ecosystem. What's starting to happen is we're bringing in haptics, behavioral techniques where you can actually use eye tracking technologies, hand tracking technologies, which enables you to manipulate the virtual space, but whilst being in your physical space. But if you can then augment that for others to experience with you as a social VR or as a collaborative learning environment, an integrated learning system in a virtual way, is where I believe things are going. And I know there's a lot of interest in that because that really is taking the gamification of learning to a whole new level, but in a way that is collaborative and bringing in these new technologies, I think is only going to bode well for teachers such as yourself that are incredibly innovative, but also a greater community of learners, which is the key here. I think we need to bring ourselves back to a sense of community of learning rather than in silo.
Amazing, James. Thank you so much for joining us. You're welcome to stay on, but I appreciate it's about 4:30 in Australia, so you might want to go back to bed or even go for a surf, knowing that you do love to get in the ocean. Just watch the sharks.
I'll probably go back to bed, if that's okay, and then go for a surf later. But can I just end by saying, you know, as a learning designer, we can create learning programs like we did, and we hope for them to be used effectively and widely. But without teachers such as yourself, Alex, and your initiative, the Future Classroom, you know, these things don't really get off the ground too quickly. Education is a very difficult system, as we all know. Bringing new technology into the system is even harder. And so I would like to commend you, Alex, in the work that you're doing in the Future Classroom. I think a lot of teachers can look up to you, and a lot of parents can also look up to you about how you're utilizing these types of technologies and methodologies to deliver a whole new way of learning.
Thank you so much. And we're going to jump over to... We're going to jump over to a parent now and get some perspective. So over to one of the parents from WISE.
Why is it important that schools teach children about social and emotional health?
It is of utter importance that schools teach children about social and emotional health. Kids of this day and age are faced with staggering amount of information or info overload. They have increased requirements at school, social media overwhelm, while at the same time they might suffer from physical and emotional neglect at home. They might be dealing with dysfunctional family, or simply might be having parents that are way too busy to attend to their emotional needs, and therefore the kids can't develop emotional intelligence in a natural way. So the need for children to build emotional resilience and emotional intelligence to deal with all that overwhelm is essential, and that's where I think WISE program proves to be so invaluable.
Before you started the WISE program, were you confident in the use of virtual reality?
I have never used virtual reality, but I'm quite open to new experiences, and was quite looking forward to starting the program. But the objective of the exercise of involving parents and students is for the parents to see how it will feel for their kids to be learning about emotional health through a cutting-edge technology, something the kids are already inherently comfortable with. Nevertheless, I felt very comfortable in learning with through virtual reality.
What makes the WISE VR program so special?
Well, first of all, it is based on a solid research. Every module has been backed up with evidence and has been referenced accordingly. Second of all, it uses a comprehensive and age-appropriate tools in telling story, which makes it an interesting narrative, and it's most likely one that will stick with kids. Then it uses cutting-edge technology, VR. Our kids are already familiar with VR and therefore are more likely to feel comfortable and interested in the topic suggested compared to other more conventional learning tools.
What was the best VR lesson and why?
It's hard to say. The most of the lessons teach you valuable techniques how to deal with emotional distress, from what thoughts and feelings are to how to find an inner safe place, how to react to bodily sensations, how to achieve an inner window of tolerance. It's just, I think all lessons are very valuable.
How did it feel coming back to school and learn with your child?
It felt great. I enjoyed being awkward around technology and amazed to see how my daughter just breezed through it. And I had learned very valuable skills that will stay with me for life. That is emotional intelligence skills. So thank you, WISE.
Wow, well that was powerful stuff and really interesting, I think, just to look both in terms of kind of the experience of education in schools and inclusion and exclusion. And we're definitely going to be picking some of those themes up later on as we get into our Q&A session. So do keep asking questions via Slido. And what a fantastic presentation there, what conversation between Alex and James there talking about WISE and that technology. Making me think about last time I used a VR headset and I was flying an X-Wing in Star Wars. And single-handedly, I defeated the whole Empire. So if I can do that, imagine what your young people can do in school with VR equipment. So really exciting stuff. Now, I know teachers aren't allowed to have their favourite students, but students are allowed to have their favourite teacher. And I've got a favourite teacher in Dorset, and that teacher is Gary Sprackland from Prince of Wales School. Now, I'll tell you why he's my favourite teacher, because every day he dresses up in a ridiculous outfit and posts a picture of himself on Twitter. And for me, that's all you need to do to be my favourite teacher. Now, Gary Sprackland is doing some really, really interesting work at the Prince of Wales School in Dorchester, in the beautiful Dorset, and really exploring some different digital approaches to personalisation of education. Now, Gary was going to be here today, but I think he got stuck in one of his outfits and couldn't make it over there. Apparently, it's not safe to drive while dressed as an octopus. But he has sent a little video over of one of the technologies that they're using to great effect in the Prince of Wales School. So let's have a look at that.
Hello, my name is Gary Spracklin and I am head teacher at the Prince of Wales School in Dorchester. Today I've been asked to share with you how we've been using Now Press Play to engage, innovate and inspire our curriculum. Now Press Play provides an immersive audio experience that inspires deeper learning. It comes with a tablet preloaded with curriculum content, a wireless transmitter and a whole class set of wireless headphones. The devices themselves, wireless headphones, can be used both internally and externally and have a huge range. We've used them in all sorts of different ways, with children and also with adults. We've been using the Now Press Play devices since June 2021 following a 2-week free trial. We were supported in our journey with some immersive staff training and some curriculum mapping tools, and are now using the devices in all age groups from preschool through to Year 4. Now let's find out more from the Now Press Play team.
As soon as the children put the headphones on, they are immediately immersed in this other world.
But the ship has eaten an iceberg.
An iceberg? What? Are we going to sink?
You can actually start to imagine that you are actually on the Titanic.
Go ahead. You can take your first steps onto Mars.
I feel like it's really happening to me and I'm really there. It really made me feel that I was in the shoes of a child from World War II.
The first hieroglyph to learn is the sun god Ra.
Now Press Play has been a great vehicle for inspiring writing in children, and that's what we believe helps to raise their attainment.
It gives them a context for the problems and the skills that they have.
We need to work out how many passengers need to fit into each lifeboat.
Answer section 3, questions 9 to 12.
And they become intrinsic learners because they're thrilled by the world.
For us, the subscription meant that we could plan our topics and plan the Now Press Play experiences across the year.
Anybody who has an MP3 player will know how to use it.
Immediately they mapped it to our curriculum.
The teacher resource packs are really useful. As a teacher, I can look at them and see what to prepare for. They are differentiated, so I can use different things for children who are at different levels, which is really helpful.
Germany has surrendered.
My favourite experience is the Titanic because there's lots of feelings and emotions in it. It made me feel as if I was there and it was all happening to me.
Now Press Play enables us to have a range of exciting new experiences for the children, which we know have an impact on attainment, but also bring a sense of fun and excitement and something different for the children and for the staff.
So that's the fantastic Prince of Wales School in Dorchester, and a big shout out to Gary Spracklin and all the students down, all the pupils down there. An amazing school with a real culture of inclusivity, and it's wonderful to see how well they're doing there. I hope to go and visit the school again soon, because it's one of those, I'm a bit like Thomas Fowler on this one. I've got a bit of a soft spot for Prince of Wales schools. It's an amazing place and they do some great work there. But Lucy, we've got to move the agenda on, so
Shaftesbury School isn't the only school around here in the news recently, as I'll let you explain.
And I know a little bit about this one. So we have a very special project going on in Shaftesbury. Okay, it's taken about a year to bring to fruition, and we're very excited about it. But one of the key players in this is Mark Blackman. Now, many of you may know Mark. You may have actually gone to school that he once was a head teacher in, which is actually this one, I believe. So, you know, I've got the opportunity to have a few minutes talking to Mark about some really exciting things that are going on here, very close to where we are now.
Thank you. Andrew, what a fantastic project we've got going on just down the road. And it's been, as you say, about a year in the cooking, but we've finally reached that point where we are beginning to flesh out the staff for a brand new special school that we're going to be opening next year. So we've got the privilege at the moment of working with a very small team, developing up the curriculum for our school, and the thoughts that we've been having around how do we carry that project forwards very much chime in with the kinds of conversations we've been having this evening. So talking about the mental health of our children, talking about the way in which we want to see them living their lives, experiencing the world around them. And for many of those children that we'll have on the former St Mary's private school site, which we're now calling the Dorset Centre of Excellence, and we're going to open Coombe House School, what we're going to be doing there is talking around all kinds of different new ways in which we can lead their education forwards. Taking the very, very best of traditional teaching, yes, but also looking at a position where we can say, what's the best new technology to help our children embed themselves in their adult lives as they go forwards? So a hugely exciting project.
Now, when we looked at the St Mary's site, as was, and that is now, the first thing we said is this must become the Dorset Centre of Excellence. This really has to be something incredibly special in the areas of special educational need and disability. But there was no shortage of technology in the school to start with, was there, when we walked through the door? But we are upgrading that, and we have ambitions to use even more technology and advance the opportunities to learn for some of those that really do need the greatest of support in our education system.
Yes, absolutely. And like you say, when we wandered around, we saw technology which was really only a few years old, and the world of technology moves forward very, very quickly. What else we're going to be doing on site? Well, we've got a vast 55 acres and 165,000 square feet of building. A special school is only one of those things that we're going to do. So we're equipping our site really with a forward focus to be able to communicate with the whole world around us. We certainly want to have a centre of excellence on site. And by that, what we mean is to be able to educate those who are leading in education, those who are leading in social care, and those who are working right across the health service, the police, and all other parts of public service. So we're building that university-style campus feel alongside a special school. We'll also be developing a children's home and thinking about respite care. But not only that, we've got a large facility which has a swimming pool and a walled garden, which is largely the size of most of Dorset, to be fair. And what we're trying to achieve is something which is a shared community asset. But you don't necessarily have to go there. You don't necessarily have to travel to this corner of Dorset in order to access the facilities. So that connected sense for our learning, for the professional community, for health community locally, for people who require elements of social prescribing, all of that will be there as part of the offer that we have as we go forward. But clearly, special school is the first part of our project, and we are investing in that educational facing technology and learning from spaces like this one and the kinds of projects that we've been seeing this evening in order to achieve what we see as the very best of the future.
Okay, now there are some questions I know people are going to want us to answer tonight. Those are going to include things like the age range of the pupils and the students that are going to be attending it, okay? How big are we going to be when we open it, and how big are we going to expand to be? And of course, is it the only answer that we have in terms of meeting special educational needs and disability going forward as a council?
It's a cracking question. So we're looking at an age range for our children and young people being from 4 to 19, and in time looking at nursery provision as well. So the whole age range. What we really want is to be able to prepare young people to step out into a future world. And I'm constantly reminded that we walk around with a phone in our pockets. The iPhone is, 17, 18 years old now, and that's the age that our children will travel through an education system. So imagine the world that they're going to go out into, and we need to prepare them for that. In terms of what we are doing, that forms part of the bigger project for Dorset Council, that £37.5 million of investment that's being put into providing spaces and places right across Dorset for young people with special educational needs. And we see ourselves as fitting right into that particular project and being a key part. We will have, when full, something of the order of 280 places available, and that's roughly half of the amount that Dorset requires as we look into the next 5 to 10 years. 280 children on site, 280 young people, that will put us in the top 20 of all special schools in the country. So we have to think really outside the box. We have to think outside of our buildings. We have to take into account the kinds of areas that there are on site, the forest, the green spaces that we've got, really to develop out an education that will fit for qualifications for our young people. This will be a special school where young people do GCSEs, some may do A-levels, others will come out with plumbing and electrical and chainsaw certificates, because we can offer that breadth of offer, but also looking into some of those things that we talked about tonight. Where are those projects, where are those things that we can link our young people into that will provide them those skill sets to take them into a digital future?
And that's a very good point when you talk about technology being used in terms of land management and horticulture and agriculture. I mean, I know, for example, I saw a fantastic piece of technology we have at Dorset Council, which will give a 3D image of a tree. So you can literally get an idea of what is going on inside that tree and whether it should be felled or not if there is signs of disease setting into it. And it's those sorts of technological advances that we're seeing increasingly that can be instrumental in the workplace as well as developing from the school settings. I mean, that's where we've got to get people really comfortable with using technology in the first instance, so that when they do go into their work environments and are faced with using technology, it doesn't come as a big shock to them, which hopefully now is not the case.
Absolutely, and I think when you think about the things that we're talking about right the way through this week as part of our Festival of the Future, we'll focus in on that agricultural technology. We'll look at the tourism elements that we're going to be seeing later in the week. And I think those are really exciting developments. You know, long ago in Dorset, we were talking about preparing our young people for that workplace. Well, that workplace is changing, and we need to respond to that change as quickly as we can, because we know that the change will carry on. So build on that technology, yes, but also allow our young people to develop those social skills, those emotional skills that will give them resilience as the world changes around them, because that is as important as the nature of the technology that they have. We have, I think, a particular video put aside for people to see a little bit of a snippet of what the St Mary's project as was and what is now the Dorset Centre of Excellence is all about. So cue that video.
Hello, I'm Councillor Andrew Parry and I'm Dorset Council's Cabinet Member responsible for children and education. And can I welcome you to our amazing St Mary's, a centre for excellence for special educational needs and disability. The opportunity to get a fully functioning school ready to go, which would save you probably about a third of the planning time and roughly about a third of the cost of investment, capital investment, is just such a unique opportunity in such a wonderful setting that it really was one of those too good to say no opportunities, and Dorset Council really had to seize the moment with it, which we did, and I'm delighted to say with tremendous backing from the community and groups and families that would of course benefit from its services. Although a lot of the facade would appear to suggest it's a much older building than it actually is, it's actually a pastiche in many respects. A lot of the complex is really very modern and has been updated. Any successful school formula of this nature will start by opening with a cohort of circa 60 pupils, and then in the rolling academic years we increase those numbers. We believe that at full capacity St Mary's offers the opportunity for us to provide a fantastic educational resource for about 280 pupils. Beyond the sort of academic abilities of the classroom, we also see the opportunities using some of the residential facilities we have here for people to gain those skills for life, those opportunities to gain the skills you're going to need to live as independently as possible and to support yourself going forward as an adult. It also offers fantastic facilities in the areas of arts and culture, fantastic music studios, and the sporting complex is also significant. There's a modern sports hall and gym facilities. There's an indoor swimming pool, there's tennis courts and there's lawns, but there's also a fabulous woodland environment and the opportunity to gain skills and knowledge in the areas of agriculture and horticulture. I'm really looking forward to us being able to open the doors to welcome visitors to St Mary's, but most of all the pupils, and it will be an amazing day when we see the first of the pupils arriving.
Wow, that was the Dorset Centre of Excellence. How excellent. And now we've got excellent people surrounding me who are going to answer some really interesting questions. And we've had some great questions from you guys out there as well. So we're going to mix a few bits and pieces and kind of just pull some threads from the things that we've been hearing today. And we have heard some really interesting things, I'm sure. So do continue to send questions through. We won't necessarily be able to answer them live now, but we will love to hear your feedback and thoughts, and we will, of course, love to answer some of those questions directly on Slido if we can as well. So I'm just going to start with you, Lucy, if that's okay, because actually, compared to perhaps many of us, you've actually experienced some of the. In fact, before we do that, before Lucy answers, I want to just talk about this thing that is on your lap. This is called a catchbox, and it is a magical microphone that you can't destroy by throwing around. So these guys are going to throw the microphone to each other. Now, it's a great tool. We want to show it here, but actually in a classroom environment, it's brilliant. So, when people want to answer questions or have a go at speaking, you throw the catchbox to them, they speak, and then it can be thrown to the next person. So we're going to have a play with that. So at least someone can try and head it away at some point. That would be amazing. So anyway, that's the catchbox. Check it out online. But first question, Lucy, you've actually experienced some of the kind of digital tools that we've been looking at, that you've been educated in this future classroom and experience. So from your point of view, what's made an impact in terms of your learning, and what sort of takeaways you've got from some of the things that you've actually experienced?
So you get to look at things a whole new perspective. So I work a lot in biology, working with this classroom, so we see things from a completely different perspective. But what I really enjoy about this classroom is the whole dynamic of teaching and learning changes. So you're working with the teacher to learn the new subject material instead of them talking at you, especially in A-level where it's a lot of information that you're taking in. You're encouraged to answer your own questions and question the material and build on your own knowledge with what you're interested in, which is what I found really fascinating.
Fantastic. And actually, you can throw it. Actually, meant to throw it. We can throw it at Alex. Actually. So Alex, that's the kind of pupil, the student position. I mean, what as a teacher, you're obviously very passionate about your students, and you teach in this environment and other environments as well. In fact, some of the questions we're getting are these techniques just for this sort of room, or can they be so these technologies and approaches be applied in other classrooms as well? But as your experience as a teacher, what are you seeing? What are you seeing different about your students in this environment than you are perhaps in more traditional teaching environments?
Great question. I think the biggest thing is the links with industry. So what we're trying to create in this space is with the whiteboards around the room, which, by the way, more so than the technology, that's been adopted in the primary schools that have come into this space. They've taken that back and put that into their classrooms because it's quite easy to implement. And there's no technology associated at all. It's just the whiteboard surfaces. And that teamwork of having a team leader and the skill of presenting, I'm sure Dan will agree from the higher education, that skill of presenting, sometimes students get to higher education, all the work, and they can't do that because they haven't necessarily done it in school. So one of the big aims that we've got for this space is teaching students how to speak and how to present, how to sell ideas, and how to stand up in front of people and have the confidence to do that.
Fantastic. Pass it over to Dan, actually. I'd be really interested to hear your reflections, Dan, from the things that we've been talking around today and the things that we've seen from that kind of higher education perspective, because obviously it's less about, I guess, classrooms, isn't it, and that kind of formal way of educating, and more, and saying, particularly your environment where you're looking around 2D, 3D in the creative spaces. It was already quite innovative in terms of different teaching approach. I'm intrigued to know the kind of the themes that have come out today, what you feel inspired by, what you want to be reflecting and taking back to your environment.
Yeah, I mean, actually the thing that struck me most is the synergies between what we do and you do at this level. There's a real follow-through. It's really great to see the work Alex has been doing and the team have set up here. I think it's amazing. And I've actually just been involved in setting up a VR AR space at AUB, and I will be nicking some of the principles for that. But it's, tools are tools, and a lot of this stuff is it's just plastic boxes at the end of the day. It's what it enables you to do and how it enables you to empower young people to think of different ideas, look at different perspectives, communicate across the globe, and answer live challenges and genuine problems that they can't solve because they're 10, 11, 12, 15 years old, but they can start to think about how those ideas could be solved in the future and where this technology can take us. So that's, I think, really what's reinforced for me is that these are communication tools, it's about how we communicate with people in our wider communities. But it's been really inspiring. Thank you.
Fantastic, thanks. If we could throw it down to Mark, would be great. Wonderful throw, super catch box. Anyway, so so I'm interested, Mark. You're with the Dorset Centre of Excellence. You know, we were talking around kind of educational in a secondary school environment like this. We've been talking around higher education. You're considering around education for children that perhaps have some additional educational needs or some challenges to perhaps additional styles of learning. How are you seeing some of the themes and the inclusivity around kind of technology being able to support, I guess, and demonstrate some of those pieces of excellence?
I think when you boil it down to what the technology is enabling, it comes back exactly to what you said, which is it's all about communication. All of these boxes, all of the things that we're holding in our hands, even this catch box, is just about communication. And one of the biggest challenges for our young people today, if they have special educational needs, it comes back to their ability to communicate with us. Lots of the problems that they face in their day-to-day lives and in society come back to that need to develop those communication skills, to enhance what they're trying to do in the classroom, to enhance what they're doing in their lives as they go out beyond school into their adult lives. And so what we would want to do is to use the tools, use the technology like any other tool within the pencil case in order to promote the best for our young people, to make sure that if we're talking about excellence, which we are, then we're talking about the best tool, the right tool to do the right job, the right tool to enable them to communicate with the rest of us, to fit into the society that we have, and to enable society to fit in with them. And I think that's the biggest challenge that we all face.
Great, thanks, Mark. If we could throw it down to Councillor Andrew Parry. Now, Andrew, I know you're very, very passionate about inclusivity. You know, with your view in terms of a leadership role, you know, across Dorset. Now, we've had a great question in asking around opportunities around inclusivity, and it's interesting. We've looked at a lot of great technology and kit here today. Some of it very expensive, and we've also looked at kind of space and environment. Although we've acknowledged that actually the kind of communications and the approaches are important. But we've had a great question around how can these approaches and things we're looking at today be more inclusive for perhaps travelling communities. Or what about those children that can't, for medical reasons, for instance, come into a school space? So, yeah, how can we influence that?
So I think one of the game changers in terms of inclusivity in the school environment that the local authorities, the councils of this world have been able to assist is in the funding of what are called the AV1s. Now, you may have seen some of those in your own classroom settings and be familiar with them if you aren't. It's a tiny little robot. It's a fantastic little device, but it enables those pupils who can't physically, for whatever reason, and it may be medically related, be in a classroom setting at a particular moment in time, but to maintain that communication link with the school on a virtual link. And I think that's really a significant place for us to be in terms of educational changes and inclusivity. Because isn't it fantastic that if you're unable to be physically in a classroom setting, you can continue that education and quite possibly finish your education rather than having to abandon it by the use of technology. What a great thing to be able to do.
Excellent. We can throw it over to Lucy, please. That would be wonderful. Now, we've had a question a little bit around this future of the classroom here and in terms of the kind of physicality of the space, but also thinking around what the opportunities are to experience that outside of that classroom environment. Now, I'm thinking, you know, we've been, as I was talking with Dan earlier, we've been through a bit of a pandemic, and I'm guessing you had to do some of your learning from home during that period. I'm intrigued to some of the experience you've had in this classroom and what you think might be possible to take outside of the classroom and to learn in different environments.
So a lot of what we learn in this classroom is already learned in the classroom, and it's a lot of consolidation work. So it's really good to be able to work in here and adapt the learning to the classroom. So, sorry, what was the question?
Well, I'm just trying to think. So, for instance, you know, what are the things that you've learned here, or the approaches that are taken here, that you could take outside of this classroom? The things that have worked well for you, could you imagine them outside of this classroom?
So yeah, definitely. A lot of it can be adapted to the everyday classroom. It doesn't have to be a massive future classroom like this. But as well as the fact that a lot of what you learn in here is the teamwork, is the presenting skills, as we said, which can be easily adapted into the classroom environment. And I think the teachers learn just as much in here as the students. they learn a lot about a different teaching style that they could bring into their classes, even if they don't have the future classroom for that day. They can still split the team up into teams and present different ideas and use the approaches that the future classroom enables you to.
Fantastic. We're going to pop that over to Alex now. So we've had lots of questions around the classroom. Here, how much does it cost? Can I have one? Do you keep the doors unlocked at night so we can help ourselves to some of our kids?
Like this one behind me.
Yeah. Absolutely. Head teacher's looking at me right now. That's definitely locked. But actually, as I think actually there's lots to say. There's lots of things we can take from this environment that we can use in other classroom scenarios or teaching scenarios. But of course, I know from what you've done here, you're not going to rest on your laurels. What's next? What's the next thing happening here? What's the next innovation? What if we came back next year would you want to be talking about?
That's another good question. We did a bit with BBC Sounds today where they asked us the same thing, and you can see that on their website. And what we kind of looking towards the future is we want to create our own virtual reality content. So at the moment, we're consumers of content. We're not creators of it. We would like our children to be able to code and create content, which we think is pretty ambitious, but it's in our sights, and that's what we're working towards. There's also a touch screen outside the room, and I'd like to get an adaptive learning platform that every child, as they walk into the room, could sync via an AI, a narrow AI, potentially a friendly AI, which would learn their learning preferences and give them individual learning targets. Imagine that. Imagine coming into school and having a personal AI that could help you learn. That came out of the St Mary's Festival. That was an idea I stole from Year 5, but it is an incredible idea and could potentially be a reality that we would love to see. And just for me, just an open invite to any educators, primary, secondary, higher ed, if you want to come in, get in touch. If you want to bring your class in here, we can open it up and you can teach your class in here yourselves and see what you think.
Great. Let's go to Andrew next. So Andrew, I mean, you've had a chance to see this here. There's obviously some great innovation actually right across the whole of Dorset, but it would be fair to say this is more of an exception rather than the norm in this county. I mean, as a leader, as an influencer, what would you like to see happen in terms of what we're learning from here today, both in terms of Dorset, but actually I'm really intrigued to the conversation we have with Ghana as well. How can we be influencers and leaders globally as well as locally?
Absolutely, and I think one of the things that you've highlighted is taking the classroom beyond the school perimeters, going out there. And there was a reference earlier on to intergenerational, for example. Now, there'll be a lot of parents, for example, who their early learning of technology would have been at school on something like a BBC microcomputer, perhaps in the 1980s, early video and CD technology. Now, time has lapsed and technology, as Mark said earlier on, moves at an incredible pace. And for a lot of those students and young people, their first experience or exposure to new technologies will be in a classroom setting because of the cost of putting that technology in a home setting. It is prohibitive for most families. So if you think back in time to when the first computers came out, they were definitely prohibitive to the majority of households in the way that perhaps things like 3D printer technology is today. But that will come down, but it will take things like educational settings, investing in those early technologies, for those R&D costs to be recuperated by the manufacturers, who will then reduce the cost down to a level where they can become more commonplace in households. In terms of international presence, absolutely. We heard fantastically how through engagement with the school, with big business, resulted in technology being sent to Guyana that allowed that huge gulf of mileage between here and there to just be evaporated into basically an internet link. What a fantastic thing to be able to do, to be able to give students that insight and their students an insight into our lives as well. That can only be a win-win situation. So there's an awful lot to be gained from it.
Well, you've got the mic, Andrew. I mean, obviously you're, with a portfolio of educators looking right across the board. Looking at the people who've got sat around here, what's sort of the main question you want to ask, looking both in terms of the age, but also the different experience and different junctures that these practitioners and wonderful student here are. What do you want to ask these guys in terms of the future of education?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I've reflected on my educational path, and others will have done as well. But if we had to fast forward a decade or two, where do we see the technology in the classroom going? I mean, that's what we really want to understand. Where should we, as the decision makers, I use that in inverted commas, be looking to put our focus on investment going forward?
Yeah, so Dan, do you want to kick off on that one?
That's a heck of a question. I think it's always a bit of a fool's game trying to look ahead and guess how things are actually going to be, because they probably won't be like that. But if you look at trends, you can see things are becoming more personalised, smaller and more invisible. So one of the key bits of kit is trying to move away from the headsets, because they can be a barrier for a lot of people. They're uncomfortable, you feel vulnerable when you're wearing them, so you need to make sure that you're in a safe space. So technology is going to be heading towards removing those barriers, I think. It was James's point about Minority Report, and using haptic technology to have things actually that you can interact with in a space. So I think it's going to be that, and that will help actually create communal experiences. People being in the same space together and sharing those realities. So I think things are going to kind of head that way. It's interesting, actually, you was talking about collaboration, essentially. And one of the things I'm trying to do with in the next few years in my job is really drive that external collaboration between students at the university, academics, technicians, and external businesses and external communities, and co-create our own virtual experiences and own designer experiences. So yeah, invisible technology and co-created experiences is where I'd plug it.
Great, fantastic. Well, Mark, actually, it'd be great to hear from you.
I'm glad I've caught that twice, actually. It's quite scary. It's the thing I've worried about the most all evening. For me, it's about taking down barriers. Our technology can, at times, put a barrier between us and other people. You sit there on the bus, you sit there in the room, and somebody's got their phone in front of them, and then suddenly the phone morphed onto someone's wrist, didn't it? And it becomes less intrusive. And I think our classroom spaces, our learning spaces, our libraries, our day-to-day life will see more and more of that transparent technology, things that aren't in the way of us communicating, but assist us with communication with other people. So I think that, for me, is the biggest trend that will just carry on over time.
Alex.
I caught it. Yeah, can I be quite radical? And I'm going to talk about flexi working hours for parents that are more of a thing, and how schools may adopt and change in the future to match that, and how schools as fixed places to learn might move slightly the parameters. And there's lots of research into something called circadian sleep rhythms, which suggests that teenagers are quite docile until about 11 a.m. in the morning, and then they wake up and their brains fire a little bit more towards the end of the day. So how can we reconstruct the school day to suit learners? And that's a tough question. That's the first thing. And then beyond that, I really do believe in the power of AI. And when I'm talking about artificial intelligence, I'm talking about warm technology that doesn't replace the human need of emotions, emotional regulation, but actually helps and supports it. So I'd love to see AI infiltrate the classroom and potentially be stitched into the fabric of our clothing as wearables. So we could have an AI stitched into our, rather than it be a smartphone or a device, and just be a little bit more interconnected as a whole. So yeah, quite radical ideas.
Great. That sounds really good. We're going to finally go over to Lucy. You can have the final thought on this wonderful question. If you were starting again, what would you like to see?
What I'd really love to see is the relationship between the home life and the school life be united a bit more. So a lot of it is you go home at the end of the day and you forget everything, or you have a piece of paper and a pen in homework. You want a fun activity to be able to reflect on your day and unite all your subjects, which is what I'd really like to see, as well as the development of technology to enable people who can't access traditional education or have barriers between coming to school and maybe feel, so whether that's mental health, physical health, or anything like that, which inhibits them from getting the education that they really deserve. So to break down those barriers and really enable people to be equal in that aspect.
Fantastic. Really great answer there. Just one, I guess, final question. We've talked a lot around, I guess, learning and education, but actually being at school or at high university is much more than just what we learn. It's about those social connections, it's about our well-being, it's really about, I guess, the development of who we are as people as well. Does anyone, and I'll kind of open this up to someone who wants to catch the box really, but any thoughts in terms of what we picked up from today, and I think particularly they're kind of into the parent reflections in terms of the possibilities, something you've been impressed with on that kind of picture around mental health, well-being, and the experience, I guess, of education. Don't all catch it at once.
Got there first, Andrew. I think it's about broadening the scope of learning, isn't it? It's not just learning that comes from a book that we turned into a piece of information technology. It's about using collective wisdom. You know, we all know far more than we ever did. The power of the internet has connected us to knowledge that we didn't even know existed, and there's more of it than we ever thought there could be. So if we take that mantra and we say, you know, social learning with each other, that's a huge direction of travel. That'd be really powerful, wouldn't it? Andrew, John.
I think for me, it's really around the power of good partnership working, and we've seen that so strong in this setting today. And I say that with all sincerity because the conversations I've had, and I've been party 10, 12 years ago to the insight of a major electronics manufacturer on what their vision was, and they are decades ahead of us. They really are. You know, we were having conversations in the early 2000s about the rollout of electric cars, and they were saying it's all there, ready to go. We need the infrastructures to be in place. Now, in that educational process of how we do that, because there are wins in things like climate change and the environment, if we can embrace technologies and use them effectively. But I do appreciate there's two strands to this. One is the educational settings that we have for students today, and one is accepting in our adult life that we are going to return to some informal forms of educational learning. And whether that is simply, for example, in some cases, becoming familiar with the use of the internet or a mobile phone technology, and for others it will be the advancement of how they use AI, for example, in engagement with the services of a local council, for example.
Great, excellent. So we're almost there, I think, with the questions. Lucy and I are going to just, we're going to float off in a moment and tell you about what is coming up later this week on Fest of the Future. So while we're getting into our spaceship, more to be revealed in a moment, Andrew, would you perhaps just, I guess, just sum up really what today is meant for you and just kind of draw this conversation together?
A huge thank you to our panel guests today. Today has been an educational setting in our Festival of the Future, and I really do hope that you've had some benefit from our discussions today and some of the videos that we've been showing you online. Now, I do appreciate that this is one part of a week of activities, so I do hope that you will continue to engage with us. Thank you for your Slido questions, by the way, really appreciate it. But I think, going to hand across to Thomas any moment now.
Did you know that this week is National Space Week, which is why we are now in space now? Did you know we were even in space? Yeah, absolutely, floating. Yes, we can breathe because of the power of some technology yet to be invented. So it's National Space Week, but I also discovered this week that Captain Kirk, William Shatner, the original Star Trek captain, is actually going to space next month on the Blue Horizon thing. So that's quite exciting, isn't it?
It really is.
Yeah, proper geeky for Star Trek fans like me. So anyway, we're beating William Shatner to space, and we're going to tell everyone what is going to be happening for Festival of the Future. So I'll start with tomorrow. Tomorrow is Wednesday, and we are going all the way from the north of Dorset to West Dorset, and we're going to be exploring technology and tourism. And the team are going to be looking at some of the most exciting visitor attractions that we've already got and looking at how technology is playing a key role in improving the visitor experience when you come to Dorset. Now, I didn't think it was possible to improve the visitor experience coming on holiday to Dorset, but apparently it is possible. Want to find out how? Check this out tomorrow, Festival of the Future. You'll find all the details online. So that's tomorrow. What's happening later in the week?
Well, on Thursday, we are going back here in North Dorset to the Rushford Estate in Shrewton to look at agritech and how that has influenced our agriculture in our new society. So that will be very exciting.
That'll be really, really interesting. So before we move off the kind of theme of education, just a reminder, do go onto our YouTube channel, Digital Dorset, and check out the STEAM event that we filmed a couple of weeks ago with Year 5 students, really looking at the future of technology. If you've not looked at that video, I really encourage you to do so. It really underpins, I think, so much of what we talked about today. It's great to listen to all these professional people, but if you want to hear it from the mouths of students themselves, that is the place to go. So thank you so much for joining us for the last 2 hours. It's been a really fascinating time. I hope you've learned lots. We've certainly learned lots. And it's been a pleasure welcoming you on our Festival of the Future. Good night.
Bye.